Okay, I'm thankful for the patience of the attendees who haven't been able to get into the panel. And where is Mary? Okay, Mary, you can see me, I hope.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Oh, there you are. I see you. Okay, terrific. Um, okay, so today we have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Mary Stein. Dr. Stein is one of the leading Jungian analysts in the world today, and he operates out of Zurich, and he's done a number of books that are of interest to this group. So I'm just going to share my screen momentarily. And also, if you want to share your screen at any time, Mary, you should be able to do it.
Okay.
But it all started with this book, which was a book that Dr. Stein wrote about, what, 25 years ago, right?
Right. Mhm.
Okay. And so Jung's Map of the Soul, an Introduction by Mary Stein. And um, meanwhile, Dr. Stein got involved with a project with a friend of mine named Thomas Arst, and that was this book, Jung's Red Book for Our Time Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And this book there are now 4 volumes of this book. This is volume 1. And um, Murray has been editing this series for about 4 years now, or 5 years almost. Um, and I'm going to ask him to speak about that. And then what is very exciting to most of the uh, viewers here is the fact um, that the singers, dancers, and producers of BTS have in the past 2 years done 2 entire albums based on Dr. Stein's work. And recently, this um, book was published by Dr. Stein and Stephen Buser and Leonard Cruz, Map of the Soul 7, Persona, Shadow, and Ego in the World of BTS. And this book is now available on Chiron and on Amazon, I believe. And in this book, Dr. Stein has given an analysis of um, each of the songs in the first 2 albums. And so I know that many people in this group are very interested in hearing his discussion of those song lyrics. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mary Stein. And Mary, please go ahead.
Um, Thank you, Skip. I think I'd like to start out by just saying a few words about Thomas Arzt and the work we've done on the Red Book. I don't know how many of the people attending here tonight, or whatever your time zone is. For me, it's in the evening. Are familiar with Jung's Red Book. This is a work that Jung worked on for about better part of 15 years in his midlife period, when he between the ages of roughly 38 and 53. And it's a book that tells the story of his inner journey to um, into the territory that he maps. When I wrote the book, Jung's Map of the Soul, I was referencing Jung's self-definition of himself as a pioneer. He often said that he was a pioneer of the psyche. He was exploring new territory, and that he was mapping a territory that he had discovered through his own inner work. And this inner work and his explorations, his journey, took place during those years of his midlife period. So, we define midlife as being that period of time when you change from young adulthood into mature adulthood, roughly at the age of 40. And sometimes it takes a period of time, several years, to make that passage. And it's similar to adolescence when you change from childhood into early adulthood. With reference to BTS, I've thought of this group as occupying that space of early adulthood and looking back, especially on their experience of adolescence and the transformation that takes place in adolescence, which has to do with forming the persona, forming the ego, and that, of course, generates what we call the shadow as well. And when the person responsible, whoever that was, I'm not sure if it was RM or one of the other members of the BTS group or one of their writers, began to use my book for their music and their lyrics. I was both surprised and very pleased, and especially that they were offering psychological insight to so many people that otherwise would not have access to this, wouldn't think of reading my book, but perhaps with a little help from BTS, they will pick up the book and delve into it a bit. But the book itself, Jung's Map to the Soul, is an account of what Jung discovered and what he shared with the rest of us in all of his writings. He wrote many books after that period, conceptualizing his experience, giving it further definition, and making it available to people of our century. This journey that Jung went on in the Red Book is a journey that has been well known in the history of literature. And that's why I called his Red Book a link in the golden chain that's sometimes called the Aria Katana. The Aria Katana, Latin words that mean golden chain, is a series of books of imagination, poems and epics that have come down to us from the long distant past, beginning in several millennia before the Common Era, with such works as the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the Epic of Gilgamesh is also the story of a journey of a hero looking for the herb of immortality. And this journey was recorded by someone of that time and became a classic in the great literature of the world. It belongs to the canon of world literature. Similarly, works like Homer's Odyssey, another story of a journey of Odysseus leaving Troy and the War of Troy and finding his way back home to Ithaca on a journey of 10 years, which is about the length of time it took Jung also to make his journey into the interior and to come back home from that journey and record everything that he had experienced there. And what he experienced there you find in the Red Book. The Red Book is a magnificent work of imagination. Jung discovered or rediscovered an aptitude or a faculty that human beings have and have exercised for millennia called imagination. Most of us don't do too much with imagination because we're trained to think in a different way. Imagination is a certain kind of thinking. It's more artistic. It's thinking with images and stories, myths, metaphors, the type of thinking we're trained to do, which is called directed thinking or logical thinking. We learn in school, we learn to do mathematics, we learn to do science, we learn to analyze texts and so on. All of that's using basically our left brain. And the left brain is the logical brain and the verbal brain. But there is a right brain, right hemisphere to the brain as well. And that is much more adept at working with images, working with metaphors, symbols, and emotion. And so the journeys that have been undertaken by human beings and recorded in great works of literature have a very strong emotional content to them. If you read the great poets such as Homer and Virgil, the Aeneid, or Dante's Commedia, the story of Dante's journey through the underworld, through the Inferno and Purgatorio and into Paradiso. These are very emotional journeys, and the poets are specialists at capturing the emotion that they experience in these journeys. And that's the case with the Red Book as well. When Jung makes his journey into the interior of the psyche, he doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He's at sea, and it's an adventure, and he tells the story of his adventures in the Red Book, and he writes about them, and he draws pictures and makes paintings of what he sees on this inner journey. And then he reflects on the journey also in the Red Book. What is the meaning of this journey? And the people that he meets, the figures that he meets on this journey. The inspiration to create with Thomas Arzt a series of reflections on Jung's Red Book that we've titled Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. The inspiration for that came out of a conversation over lunch that I had with Thomas Arzt, and I believe it was 1915 or 1916. And Thomas Arzt was, I'll show some images of him in a moment. I'll share my screen and you can get a look at him. I speak of him with some mixed feelings because he passed away this year, surprisingly, and without anybody's anticipating that he would die at this time. He was 65 years old, but it was during the COVID lockdown in Germany, and he had an underlying heart condition, and he passed away in the hospital on Easter Sunday this year. So when I speak of him, I'm doing it with some mixed feelings because we had a very close relationship, and the inspiration for this series came out of our conversations. Thomas Arzt was very taken with the Red Book, and he felt that it really offered assistance to people who are struggling for direction in our time, who are looking for soul, searching for soul. Jung's journey is a search for soul. It begins with Jung calling out the window one evening from his home in Küsnacht, Switzerland. "My soul, where are you? I've lost you. I've lost contact with you." And so he goes on this inner journey with what he calls the spirit of the depths, and he discovers his soul. And he has conversations with his soul, which is represented in the story as a female figure. And he meets many other characters in the course of his inner journey. And Thomas Arzt felt that Jung's account of his journey through this uncharted territory offered us an opening and a way of finding soul for ourselves. it isn't that we would find what Jung finds are found on his inner journey, the same figures. We don't want to go to meet Elijah and Salome and Philemon, which are the characters he found, but to find our own inner figures. And this way is pursued through the use of what Jung called active imagination. And active imagination is an imaginative engagement with the psyche, with the inner world. When I speak of the map of the soul, I'm speaking about the inner world. This was Jung's discovery, Jung's greatest discovery, as I was told by one of his immediate followers who knew him very well. His greatest discovery was the inner world. And we all have an inner world, but we don't know it. And we don't know how to access it very well. We haven't been trained to do that in our education and in our culture. Now we have access to our emotional world and to our imaginal world, to our imagination through the work of artists. And BTS is, I would say, a window of opportunity for people to experience something of the soul, certainly to get insight into their own inner world through reflecting on what is a persona. I'll define that in a moment. What is a persona? What is the ego? What is the shadow? And what does it feel to recognize them? What does it feel like when you listen to the music of BTS and you watch them and so on? You have very strong emotional reactions. And that's what art does. It goes below the surface of our rational minds and it stimulates our feelings. And often people have said about BTS and other musical groups that they respond to, I don't know what it is, but it touches something very deeply in me. It really touches my core. And when that happens, then you know the door has been opened to this inner world. There is something in your inner world that responds to what you're hearing and seeing on the stage or on the screen. And art is the means by which people do have access to an inner world, or at least the beginnings of the journey for themselves. Now, Jung certainly appreciated art. He looked at art. He went to the opera. He listened to music, and he created art. He was an artist of sorts, not a professional artist, but I think the Red Book will go down in history as one of the great artworks of the 20th century. If you open up the book and you look at the pictures, it's an extremely valuable book. It's kept in a safe deposit box in one of the large banks in Zurich, Switzerland. It's so precious that when it travels to other sites to be viewed, it has to be insured for millions of dollars. If it were to go on the market at an auction, I can't imagine how much money it would take to buy that work. You would be bidding against billionaires because it's a fascinating work. It's one of a kind. There isn't another one like it. And for many years, it was kept in secret. It was Jung's secret. Jung often said, it's important to have a secret, not to be secretive, not to hide things from other people. That's not what he meant. To just be sort of strange and different and not talk about yourself. But to have an important secret means that you've got something, a treasure that you are protecting and you don't want to expose it to other people who won't appreciate it or who will envy you if they see it, or who will try to copy it or steal it. So you protect it. And Jung protected his secret, the Red Book, in a very careful way. He showed it to a few people in his lifetime, close people to him in his inner circle. And but he did not publish it, and because he thought it would be misunderstood, people would misinterpret it, and it was very personal. It was the story of his own inner journey, and such personal texts like diaries can easily be misunderstood and misinterpreted. So it was put away. It was kept in his library, and then it was put in a bank vault until the late 1900s, when his son passed away. His son had been the administrator of his estate, Franz Jung, and his grandson, Ulrich Hörny, was put in charge of the estate, the literary estate. And Ulrich Hörny was persuaded by a historian, a scholar named Sonu Shamdasani, to consider publishing it. And there was a lot of discussion about that for several years before an agreement was reached that Sonu Shamdasani would edit the book, would create footnotes for the book. It would be done as a scholarly edition. And it was great news to the Jungian world when it was announced that it would be published, and that it would be published in a facsimile edition, which meant that we would have a version of it that looks like Jung's Red Book, in the same size. The pages are the same size. So you have the pictures and the calligraphic script and everything as it looks in the Red Book itself, in Jung's Red Book. And Jung had taken meticulous care to enter the text in the Red Book in a very carefully, artistically honed calligraphic script that he learned somewhere. And it looks like a medieval illuminated manuscript in places. And this book was then edited and very carefully photographed. It took a week of digital photography to photograph each page carefully. And then it was all put together with commentary, introduction, translation, and appeared in English and German in 2009. And it's since then been translated into many languages: Spanish, French, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Russian, maybe 20 or 30 languages by now, Turkish. By now it's a piece of world literature, and it is appreciated by people all over the world. So when Thomas Arzt and I were discussing the Red Book in 2015, it had been around for about 6 years, and there had been considerable discussion of it and response to it. Some books had been written, many articles had been written, conferences had been held about it. And at first I was a bit reluctant. I wasn't, when Thomas Arzt said to me, well, let's consider producing some commentaries on the Red Book, because it needs to have a context. People need to be reflecting on it and discussing it. And I thought, well, quite a bit of discussion has been carried out already. Is more really necessary? Will authors respond to an invitation to write an essay on the Red Book? But I said to him, well, let's give it a shot. Let's try it, and we'll see what happens. And I happen to know a lot of people in the Jungian community, and scholars and analysts. And so we sent out a letter of invitation to them. And lo and behold, we got a almost 100% affirmative response. I was astonished that there was so much willingness on the part of these scholars and analysts to devote themselves to the time to write an essay of 6,000 words or so with footnotes and references and everything. that is quite a gift. But we got a great response. And so we started putting together the volumes in this series. As Skip has said, there are now 4 volumes in the series. And I'm going to just share my screen for a moment so that you can have a picture of Thomas Arzt. Because each time we would put together a volume, we would meet for lunch and take a photograph of ourselves. And there we are. This is in preparation for volume 1. I'm standing beside Thomas Arzt. We're at a restaurant in Zurich that was one of Jung's favorite restaurants called the Veltliner Keller. And we're very happy that the first volume is about to be published. About a year later, we met again at another restaurant in Zurich called the Orsini. You see it in the background. And a second volume was now ready. And then a year later, we met at my home in Thun, Switzerland. You see the mountains in the background. And another volume was ready. And then we had a conference at the International Institute for Analytical Psychology in Zurich, and a conference on the Red Book and Jungs Red Book for our time. And here you see a picture of 3 of us at that conference. There's Thomas Arzt on the right, Paul Britsche in the middle. He's one of the contributors to wrote one of the essays, and that's me on the left. And then this is the last picture, just before volume 4 was published. We're at a restaurant in Zurich called the Kronenhalle, and there's Thomas Arzt on the right and myself on the left. So as I look at these pictures, I remember those lunches, and I remember how surprised and happy we were at the quality of the essays that were coming in there. They were really remarkable, each one different. In these 4 volumes, there are about 70 essays, all by different authors from around the world, from many different countries and language groups, all reflecting on Jung's Red Book, his journey to the inner world. And here's a wonderful picture of Thomas Arzt taken a few years earlier at Jung's Tower in Bollingen. This was his favorite picture of himself, he told me. And behind him is what Jung called the orphan stone. Jung carved in stone figures, text, and this stone is placed in the garden of his tower in Bollingen, on the upper part of Lake Zurich in Switzerland. And he spent many, many hours, often by himself in this. It was like a hermitage. He built it for himself, had no running water, no heat. He wanted to keep it as primitive as possible, he said, so his ancestors would feel at home there. Nothing modern about it. He cooked for himself. He carried the water, he pumped the water, he cut the firewood to cook. So he took care of himself. Occasionally he would invite guests or friends to come and spend some time with him out there. And so that's where he did a lot of his meditation, and his further discoveries were made, his inner discoveries and his inspirations came from his meditations at Bollingen. That's a place that many Jungians love to travel to. It's a kind of sacred spot in the Jungian world, difficult to find entry. You have to apply for a permit to visit it in advance, and then somebody meets you and shows you around. So you can't just go there. Jung's house has been turned into a museum. It's more accessible, but Bollingen is still quite difficult to make one's way to. But it is possible, and so these are some of the sites that people who make a pilgrimage to Switzerland to visit Jung, Jung's house, Bollingen, Jung's gravesite, and so on. They like to visit. And here's one of my favorite pictures of Jung in his later years. This is long after he made the Red Book. But here you see the image of a wise old man. He was called the wise old man of Küsnacht. And people would come to visit him from around the world to have sessions or to have an interview. One could say that he discovered his wisdom in that journey to the inner world that he recorded in the Red Book. And now it's wonderful that that is all available to us to study and read and think about. So this series of books, Jung's Red Book for Our Time, is an attempt to see how the Red Book can be used by people in our world today. And maybe BTS someday will make an album called The Red Book as well. They seem to be very fond of Jung's writings and Jung's work. Pardon me? Yes. I think I'm hoping that BTS will continue with their work on the inner world, not necessarily using my book, but their last album was called The Journey, BTS 7, The Journey. And I discussed the pieces of that album in a conversation some time ago. And the last number on the album, number 13, significant number, beginning of a new series, I think, is called The Journey. And it's just a musical piece. There are no words to it, no singing, but it suggests setting out on a journey further into the inner world. What BTS has sung about so far are topics very relevant to the first half of life. And of course, the BTS members are all in the first half of life. They're in their 20s, late 20s now. And so these topics of the persona and the ego and the shadow are very relevant to that stage of life, because that's when an identity has to be formed. And it's very useful to know that there's more to oneself than the persona. And when they sing about persona, you can see that they've reflected on themselves as different from the persona. They have a distance from the persona. BTS, the members of BTS joined that group at a very young age. They were teenagers, and they were spotted in rehearsals or in various contexts by the organizers of BTS, and they were chosen because of their special talents for dance or singing, or because of their looks, and they were assembled into a group, and it's a very tight group. And they live together, they work together, they're very dedicated. It's almost like a military group. They're so tightly involved with each other, and they're on a journey together. They act as one. They each have their own personality, and there are some differences, but they're very much a unit. And they sing about that. And they are very dependent on their army. Their army is a fantastic organization, far-flung throughout the whole world. And I've been contacted by many of the groups, army groups in different countries. I've given some interviews and had discussions with them. I've answered questions that their members have asked about the albums and the songs. And so BTS and its army are a very powerful movement in the world today. I was first introduced to BTS by a student, a Japanese young man who is a psychologist in Japan, and he studies in Zurich. He's finished now, but he told me one day in class that my book, Jung's Map of the Soul, had been put on the BTS website. And I was amazed. I said, well, I didn't know what BTS was at that time. I said, what does that mean? Who are they? I found out that they're such a popular international group, and that my book was among 3 that they had put on their website, along with Steppenwolf. I think it was Steppenwolf by um, Hermann Hesse, and a book called The Art of Love by Erich Fromm. These are 2 classics of the 20th century, great books. So I was very pleased to be included. And then the next thing I heard was that they were going to make an album called Map of the Soul, Persona. So I almost fell off my chair when I heard that. I was very interested to see what they were going to do with the psychological theories and concepts. And then I saw a film of them at the United Nations, and RM was addressing the assembly at the United Nations and speaking for the youth in the world. It had something to do with helping the youth of the world to overcome some of their psychological issues and problems, working against mobbing and high suicide rates in some countries. And so BTS was all about loving yourself, appreciating yourself, not getting too hooked on what other people think about you. And so their work on persona was very important for that reason, that our persona is our social identity. And that's who we are in our social groups, in our schools, with our friends, with our families. And that's vulnerable. But the essence of us is not limited to the persona. That's just a piece of us. And so what RM said to the assembly was, I'm not identified with my persona. I come from a relatively poor family, not in Seoul, Korea, in some small town out in the countryside. I love my family. I go back there as often as I can. I remember who I am. I remember my history. So I'm not going to get lost in this glamorous world of celebrity. And that was a very powerful statement. And I admired him for saying that. And I thought, well, this group is really onto something. And I think they're going to make a contribution to the world, but because they touch so many lives and so many people's emotional depths with their music. And so I was very happy to contribute whatever I could to their work. And then they came along and they reflected further. They went deeper. Persona is the first level, the outer level, the skin, so to speak, of our personalities that we have to interface with other people and to relate to them. And it's vulnerable, like the skin is. You can get a rash, you can get scratched, you can get burned. And all of that happens on social media. It happens in our social groups and in our families. And so we're vulnerable in our personas. But if we have a sense of self that isn't limited to the persona, that we can step back from the persona and affirm ourselves, we're in much better shape and we're much stronger. And so their next step was to sing about the ego and the shadow. And the ego is that part of us that is at the core of our consciousness. It's the center of our consciousness. And it can identify with the persona or not identify with the persona. It's important that the ego remembers who it is and what its history is and where it comes from. Where were you when you were born? Where were you and with whom were you when you were given your name? Your name is a part of your identity. It's a little deeper than the persona, but it's part of your social identity. But there's something even before that. And sometimes I say, we're like the cat that T.S. Eliot wrote about when he said that every cat has 3 names. There's a name that everybody knows. There's the name that only a few people know, like a nickname, intimate friends. And there's a name that only the cat knows. And when you see a cat sitting quietly by itself, staring into the distance, what it's doing is meditating on the name that only it knows. And that's the core of our ego. And that's what we have to get a hold of and hang on to and value and love that core. And that's what BTS sings a lot about, loving oneself, not in an egotistical sense, but appreciating the gift that we have of being a human being, of being alive, of living in this time as an individual. And then they sing also about the shadow. And once you begin becoming conscious of your personality, you see the persona, that's not all of who you are. You sense that you have an ego that's been there since you were born and is with you now. And there is a shadow side. And that is another step toward consciousness, to realize there is a part of us that we don't often recognize. And that's sort of the opposite of our persona. If our persona is nice, the shadow is not nice. If the persona is kind, the shadow is unkind, is selfish. And the ego is sometimes in collusion with the shadow. And sometimes it's identified with the persona. So the ego needs to become aware of the shadow and of the persona, and to stay separate from both of them, but to be aware of them. And so this movement toward awareness of persona, ego, and shadow that BTS has been promoting and singing about, I think is such a contribution to psychological maturity in the world of their listeners, of the BTSARMY and other people who listen to their music and appreciate it. Of course, their music goes beyond these concepts. The music takes you into another space, that music always does. It touches your imagination, it touches your feelings, and it carries you along with it. And you want to be sure when you listen to music that it's carrying you into a good space, that it's carrying you safely. Jung himself was a little suspicious of music, because music can also take you to very dark places and very shadowy places and demonic places. There are different kinds of music. In the Greek world, there was Apollo's music and there was the music of Dionysus. Apollo's music is very high-minded, is very spiritual, is very uplifting, is very harmonious, beautiful. The music of Dionysus is more tricky. It can take you into excess, into intoxication, into ecstasy, states of ecstasy, which might be okay for a time, but they can also be dangerous. And BTS in its album, in its second album, also sings about Dionysus, which I found very interesting. And Dionysus is the Greek god of excess and of intoxication, the god of wine. And in that song, they sing about drinking too much the night before and feeling it the next day, having a hangover, but enjoying it so much while it lasts. And you can really get into it, but it's a safe container because they know what they're doing. And it's in the context of other music about the shadow and the ego and the persona. So I think you can safely accompany BTS on that part of the journey as well. Everybody has to experience Dionysus sometime in their lives. It's a part of our human nature and human wholeness. It's just that if it is only Dionysian and not balanced by Apollo or other values and ideals, it becomes addiction and excessive, and you can get lost in that world of intoxication. So I think BTS is taking up very important psychological topics in their works, and they're sharing insights with their listeners and their followers. And I'm very impressed by the responses I've gotten from BTS ARMY, questions that have been asked of a very high level, sophisticated kind. I've been surprised at the level of knowledge that the questioner has obviously shown in his question or her question. And so I'm looking forward also in a few minutes to going into a Q&A part of this program where you can ask questions or make comments. Before going there, let me just see if there was something else I wanted to mention. Oh yes, I wanted to say that this idea of the Aria Katana is what it means is it's a golden chain. So you have links in the chain. And that can be the links of, as I said, the imaginative works of world literature, all in a linked, a golden chain that we all benefit from, we learn from, and we can have access to the imagination of humankind in these works. But there's another meaning of the Aria Katana, and that is that it that it links everything that is. There was a medieval alchemy text called the Aria Katana, which speaks about how everything is connected. So it's the idea that within all the diversity that we have in the world, all the different cultures, all the different personalities, the different racial groupings and gender possibilities, in the midst of all that diversity, there's also unity, that we are all, at one level, we're all one. At another level, we're all individual and we're all different. And we can hold that paradox, those opposites together, with this idea of the Aria Katana, that hidden beneath the surface of the diversity, there is this golden chain of unity. And I think that in a way, BTS, I was thinking about that today, symbolizes that because there are 7 of them. So there are 7 individuals in the group. And 7 is, of course, a very important number in history of number symbolism. It's often a sacred number. It's a number that cannot be divided by any other numbers except itself and the number 1. So it's very solid. It's a unit. So you could say there is unity in BTS, and they certainly show it in their behavior, in their performances, in the way they interact with each other. They are very united, and they present that to the BTSARMY and to the world. They appear together. They work together. They live together. And so unity and diversity, in a way, come together in BTS. And there you see this idea that there is unity below the surface of diversity. That's the Aria Katana, the links that unite them in their common devotion to their music and in their mission. And I look on them also as, in a way, apostles of depth psychology. You know, the apostles were the followers of Jesus who took the message of Jesus into the world and spread it throughout the whole world. They were called apostles. There were 12 of them. The idea of the apostle is that they take from the treasure that has been discovered, the wisdom that has been discovered in a text or by a prophet. In the case of the Christian apostles, it was the life and meaning of the life of Jesus Christ and his teachings. This wisdom and treasure is taken into the world and shared with the rest of the world. And I see the BTS, in a sense, as apostles of depth psychology. Um, Jung was a kind of prophet, and he left behind him a great treasury of wisdom in his writings that many people have used and have found extremely helpful in their own personal lives, and then people like myself have used in our professional lives to teach to other people. And so BTS, I feel, is a part of a large movement in the world toward attempting to raise consciousness among human beings, become more conscious of our psychic world, our inner world, so that we will be more responsible and more careful with the world that we live in and the other people that we live with. And so I think they bring consciousness, the possibility of consciousness, to this new generation of people who are their followers and listeners in the army. And this gives their followers a distinct advantage, a psychological advantage over others for development, for psychological development, and for what we call individuation. If you get these concepts and you learn how to use them in your own personal life, you're a step ahead of people who don't have that. You know something valuable about life, about the world, and it opens the door to more journey and more adventures, as I hope also BTS will continue to do, because there's still other levels that are discussed in Map of the Soul. The anima and the animus are still to celebrate and sing about, and the self and synchronicity and many other topics that would be appropriate and useful for the BTSARMY to learn about. So I think, Skip, I'll stop here and we can have the rest of the time, about an hour or so, for questions and discussion, if that's okay.
Terrific, Murray. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was very useful. We have over 200 people, or 171 people on the attendee list who haven't been able to get onto the screen. And one of them is a representative of Army Magazine. So it would be poor of me not to allow her to speak. So I'm going to allow her to talk now. Her name is Marcy Bridges. So Marcy, if you will unmute, you should be able to ask your questions.
Thank you, Skip. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, Dr. Stein. We actually spoke about a year ago, very similarly to this, with ArmyCon in Los Angeles.
Right.
Yeah, so it's nice to see you again. My question is really about Map of the Soul's Shadow. The interview that you did with Len Cruz, that was that whole chapter, I think it was chapter 1 in that book. He had asked you about our child tendencies. And in your answer, you said something that kind of spoke to me, but I've always been curious about. You had mentioned our superior function. So we can, a lot of times we suppress those child tendencies or those childlike functions, but then our superior function takes over. So I wondered if you could speak to that just a little bit. Is that our career? Is that our passion, or is it kind of both? Or am I way off the mark?
No, let me say a few words about that, Marcy, and see if I'm meeting your need, your question.
Okay.
When we speak about the superior function, it's a reference to Jung's typology. He said that we have 4 different functions and 2 attitudes that we have available to us as conscious human beings. The 4 functions are thinking and feeling, sensation and intuition, and the 2 attitudes are extroversion and introversion. I'm going to pack quite a lot in a short answer here, but what the superior function refers to is the one of those functions that we tend to prefer and develop as we grow into through childhood and into adolescence and early adulthood. So if you're, and we prefer it because it's a little better than the others, or it's easier for us, or we find it more useful, or we find it more convenient. If you, for instance, have very sharp senses, your senses are very carefully attuned to the world around you. So your sight, your hearing, your smell, your taste, your touch are very good when you're little. And you find an opportunity to develop those in certain creative ways, maybe drawing, painting, dressing, selection of colors. You notice a lot of things. You tend to use that function more than the others. If you're very good, let's say by the time you're 6 or 8 or 10 at mathematics, it's just a natural gift. That's a thinking function. It's logical. You can solve problems easy, quicker than other people often. It comes easy to you. You will tend to develop in that direction. Maybe you become a mathematician or a scientist or a statistician or something of that sort. So you tend to prefer the function that works best for you, and it helps you make your way in the world. What that tendency does is it creates one-sidedness over time, so that you're leaving out the other possibilities. You're leaving out the other 3 functions, and one of them in particular is called the inferior function. And these other functions remain in a kind of childish state. So for instance, I had a man in therapy with me quite a few years ago now, who was very highly developed as a musician. He was a professional musician. He played the violin. He was top in his field. But he discovered one day that what he really had left behind was a wish or a desire to paint and draw. Now, music has to do with a lot of abilities. He was very intellectually oriented, very good in his thinking function, good with languages. He was probably a thinking, intuitive type. And he had developed his hand muscles to an extraordinary extent. But when he tried to draw, he said it was like a child drawing. He couldn't draw or paint very well because, he said, when he was 5 or 6 years old, his mother said to him, "You're no good at art. Stay with music. Stay with the piano, stay with the violin." So he had specialized in music and he'd left art behind. Well, he decided he wanted to catch up with himself. So he went out and he bought a set of paints and some paper, and he started to draw. And then he discovered a self-help book that said, let the hand that you've not developed, your right hand to do it with the left hand, if you're left-handed, do it with the right hand, the hand that you haven't developed, lead the way in your artwork. So he let his left hand start drawing, and he started to speak to his left hand. And he got into a dialogue with his left hand, between his left hand and his right hand. His right hand represented his superior function, left hand, the left behind child, inferior function. And the left hand was about 6 years old, where he'd left it before. And he asked the child, the left hand, "Well, what do you want? What do you want to do?" And the left hand started talking to him. And so he was able to develop not only his artistic ability, but a sense of what he had left behind in his childhood, some abilities, some of his functions. And that's what we try to do in the second half of life, to catch up with what we've left behind. In the first half of life, it's developing toward superiority as best we can in our ego, in our persona, in our career, in our everyday life. We want to be a success in the world. And so we use our best functions. In the second half of life, we need to catch up with what we've left behind. So people will take up things that they didn't have time for, or found too trivial, or had a long passion for, but just never felt it was appropriate. And we'll take the time later to do that work. And that is developing then toward wholeness. Now, how BTS will go about doing this, I don't know. They're really good at singing and dancing and athletics, and maybe they'll become thinking types, intellectuals. Some of them are already a bit.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I've got a question here that came up on the chat from Selah, who asks, you mentioned that it's difficult to access the map of the soul because we don't have the correct resources to do so. How would you recommend ways to access that?
Well, the map of the soul, the books are like a map. So the map isn't the journey. Let's put it that way. You can read the map and you get a sense of what's out there, but it's abstract. You know, you can see, well, here's a city and here's a plain and here's a river, here are some mountains and so on the map. But when you go on the journey, you know, the map is somewhat useful and helpful, but you're going to discover things that aren't on the map, or you're going to discover details. You know, it shows you some mountains, but it doesn't show you everything about the mountains. So you get into the mountains and you start discovering a whole bunch of new things that aren't represented in the map. How to get on the journey is the question. So the map can help you want to go on the journey. Say, wow, that's interesting. What is that inner world? It sounds like it's pretty amazing and even exciting, or some people are really put it aside and don't want anything to do with it. It looks scary to them. But how to go on the journey? So there are a couple of things you can do to go on the journey. When I first read, my introduction to Jung was the age of 24. I read Jung's autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And I was so fascinated by it, by his life. And it inspired me to start recording my dreams. I had never paid any attention to my dreams before. Everybody dreams. You dream when you're a child. You even dream in the womb probably, but not visually, but you're dreaming throughout your life. And Jung says we're dreaming all day long, even though we don't know if we're awake. It's going on at an unconscious level. And during the dream time, you dip down into it. So I started recording my dreams. And that brought a whole new perspective on life to me. I had no idea what was in there. And when I started writing them down and studying them, I began to get a sense of what was under the surface. So that was, for me, the beginning of the journey. And then I went into an analysis with not a Jungian analyst. He was I'd say a Jungian-oriented psychotherapist. He was a very good psychotherapist, lots of experience, and he had some interest in Jungian work and working with dreams. And I started working with him. So that increased the intensity of my exploration, and being in dialogue with another person who knows the territory is very helpful. It helps you get into it and explore it more in more detail, and adds energy to it. And then I decided to go into training as a Jungian analyst. And while I was in training in Zurich, this was around early 1970s, I had the opportunity to be in lectures by Mary Louise von Franz and Barbara Hanna, who were first generation Jungians. They had worked directly with Jung. And they were very, very important and influential in drawing me to the possibility of doing active imagination. Active imagination is kind of advanced practice for most Jungians, and it's something that you have to be a little careful of. It's best if you do it while you're with somebody who can guide you and help you along the way, an analyst or a therapist who knows something about it. But it's basically what Jung did when he composed the Red Book. The Red Book is made up of his active imagination experiences and his dreams and his reflection on them. And so this combination of working with your dreams and active imagination is the way to get into the territory. those are two ways to get into the territory. There are of course, other ways as well. We project all the time. We create a world out of our projections. And if we look carefully at our projections, they tell us something about our inner world. Look at the people you idealize and admire and don't know. Like BTS, for example. We don't know who they are. We don't know what it would be like to be with them in person. I've invited them to come to Zurich, and I will meet with them and give them some lectures free of charge, but I haven't heard back from them. I don't know what it would be like. I'm sure they're very nice, interesting young men, but they're different from what you get when you see them on stage because you project, and they want that. They elicit that. All performers ask you to project onto them. They are acting a role. So if you look at what you project, that also gives you some information about the inner world. If you project wisdom, if you project horror, if you project something bestial onto somebody, you're projecting shadow material. If you project, the anima and the animus are great projection carriers, beautiful women and handsome young men like the BTS young men. The interesting thing about BTS is that they don't elicit pure gender projection in the sense that they aren't, very one-sidedly masculine, even though their gender is male, but they're androgynous in their appearance and in the way they move and sing. So the projection onto BTS, as I've thought about it, isn't so much animus, I think, as maybe self, because the self is a combination of masculine and feminine features. And before they're differentiated and separated, they're together. So there's a kind of wholeness that's expressed in androgyny that I think maybe BTS captures in the way they appear and dress and comport themselves and so on, and sing. It's very interesting. For instance, most singers, single singers, performers, are either very masculine or very feminine. They draw on the anima or the animus strongly. And if you look at them and respond to their music and so on, they draw on that part of the psyche. BTS doesn't do that. BTS is more a wholeness, in my view. I mean, we can discuss that. Maybe other people feel very differently about it, but that's the way I read them.
Okay, just for
to go on the journey, you need to do this kind of inner work, reflection, and look at your dreams and try active imagination if you feel it's comfortable and safe.
Right. For procedural reasons, let me just mention that we have 162 people who are attendees and not able to be panelists. So if any of the people who are not on the panel want to ask a question, please press the raise your hand button, which can be found in the participants section. And I did have one before, which was Yasin Adam. Is Yasin Adam, you're now a panelist, but do you have a question, Yasin? Okay, there's another one here, Remedios Mahuse. You've got your hand up, so I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead and ask your question, sir. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, Dr. Stein.
Or Remedios.
Okay, my question is, when I was reading Mod 7, I started to have vivid day and night dreams alongside unusual creativity. But when I finished the book, these dreams and creative thoughts suddenly went away. Is there a psychological phenomenon to explain this rare occurrence?
Well, I can't give you a definitive explanation. I do know that when that the unconscious can be stimulated, not in the sense that you can predict what you're going to dream about or anything like that, but if you expose yourself to certain kinds of artworks intensively, reading or listening to music and so on, over a period of time, it can stimulate the unconscious to become more active, and you'll have stronger dreams. The fact is, if you sleep normally for 7 or 8 hours, or even 5 or 6 hours, you will go through a cycle of sleep that that contains dreams where you are dreaming. And this has been studied carefully in dream laboratories and so on. The problem is remembering the dream. So you can train yourself to remember your dreams, even if they aren't so strong, by putting a pad of paper by your bedside. And if you wake up in the night with an image, or write it down immediately, even if it's just a fragment. And then when you come back to it the next day, you might be able to remember more. Another trick that I've learned over the years is when you wake up from a dream, don't turn over. Don't turn over in your body. Don't flip to the other side or turn in any way, because that seems to make the dream go away. It's like shining bright light on you. The brain reacts to it, and your dream memory disappears suddenly. So try to lie still and go over the dream images that you can remember a couple of times to dig a deeper trench in your memory system. And then when you turn on the light and wake up, write it down immediately before you start doing anything else. So there are ways to train yourself to remember and record your dreams. Generally, when people go into analysis, they start dreaming quite a lot. If you do active imagination, it can cut down actually on the dream intensity, because that amount of energy is going into the imagination and might be draining it away from the intensity of the dreams. So I can't give you an exact answer to that, but it sounds like reading that book stimulated the unconscious quite strongly, so that the dreams were more intense and you could remember them. But keep working at it, and I think you'll be able to continue the dream series.
So Jessica Vicedo, are you there? You have your hand up.
Hi, Mr. Conover, and hi, Dr. Stein.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, sir. So I was just listening because I'm also taking up my master's in psychology. I actually only have my internship to go before I take the licensure exam. And I'm also writing about the persona, the ego, and the shadow. So I was actually reviewing the books, and also trying to portray it side by side with the music videos of the group. And there are a lot of images that I was just wondering if they would actually connect somehow to the Veil of Maya, because that's something that I also read in Jung's work. And I was wondering if such symbolisms would be present in the music videos of the group as we transition from one archetype to another.
Mm-hmm. The Veil of Maya.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. When Jung, if you want to read about projection, I suggest a very good book by Mary Louise von Franz called Projection and Recollection. projection and recollection. And Maya is a veil of illusions. It's from Hindu mythology and religion that we live in a world of illusion, largely, that's spun by this factor called, or this figure called Maya. And Jung associates Maya with the anima, that the anima creates illusions about other people and about the world. We know that we're projecting all the time, and we project, as I said, onto different parts of the psyche onto different people, sometimes very strongly, so much so that we distort reality and we can't experience the other person as they actually are. And psychology studies this phenomenon. Jung was responsible for inspiring the thematic apperception test. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a famous test much used by psychologists. Probably you learned about it in your graduate program, the TAT. And the thematic apperception test was created by a student of Jung's at Harvard. And it's a test that uses images and asks people to tell stories about what they see. And then based on what they project into those images, you can make an analysis of their psychological condition or their pathological states and so on. So there are a lot of projective tests. The Rorschach test is another one. Jungians have been quite interested in that. And all of that is to say that we project a lot onto the world. Jung says that we project into the areas that are unknown. If you know something well, you tend not to project much into it. If you know a person really well, you don't project a lot of unconscious material. You project into the unknown. So it's often the case that brothers are rather disgusted with their younger sisters. Another boy may come along and find the perfect anima figure in their younger sister, and the brother will say, I can't imagine what you see in her. But he finds it in the neighbor or in somebody from another country. We project onto what we don't know. And that's where Maya is active. So the more you know about the world around you, the less you're going to be projecting onto it. For years, people projected all kinds of things onto the United States from Europe. They projected a land of opportunity and great possibilities. Now that projection on the part of Europeans, at least, has changed a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. So now it's a very different image. It's also not reality. What people see from a distance, if they haven't been there and they don't know it carefully, what they see is what they're projecting onto it. And so when we travel, it's very good. It's educational because we learn about parts of the world that we possibly projected on before. Jung was very fond of traveling. He traveled to the United States quite a few times. He traveled to Africa. He traveled to India. And he said he wanted to step out of his own culture and check his own biases, his own blind spots by getting out of European culture. But when he was there, he also looked around and he explored those parts of the world. So they were not subject to his projections so much anymore. So what you know, you don't project upon so much. And when you get to know a reality in a more realistic fashion, you may not like it as much, or you may like it more. It depends on what you've been projecting and what the reality is. So you can be surprised either way, disappointed are very happily surprised by what you find when the projection falls away and you discover something more genuine, authentic.
So Penelope Ryder, you had your hand up before I could get you into the panel. So go ahead and ask your question, Penelope.
Okay, my question was, and it might be a big one to answer, but I think you might have answered it with the book, I Will Get the Projection and Reflection. But my question was, do you have any tips on when you're receiving negative projection from others that contains no reality in it?
Yes, that is a very difficult question. Basically, the best thing to do is not accept the projection, but that's hard. When you are projected upon by somebody, either positively or negatively, it affects you. That's one of the problems. You know, if somebody projects something very positive on you, say falls in love with you, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met in my life, you're fabulous, you're my soulmate, you will respond to that in your feelings, and you will reciprocate in a sense. We call that countertransference, or the response that your psyche makes to it. On the other hand, if they project something negative on you, something hateful, something disgusting, you will respond to that. And that is one of the problems with in questions like racism, for instance, where whole racial groups are projected upon. They react to that and they start feeling placed in that position, and they start thinking about themselves that way. They have to resist that, and that's what feminism has been all about. That's what racial justice is all about, to resist the projection. It's very difficult to do, and to change it, to change the perception of the other person so that they stop projecting that particular feature of themselves or their social group onto you. So it's a very difficult subject. Analysts face it all the time, psychotherapists, because in the intensity of a psychotherapeutic relationship, there's quite a lot of projection going on, at least at the beginning. And the therapist has to be trained to be able to read that, to resist it, to interpret it in a helpful way. And you often don't know in social situations what is the source of that projection. Why are people projecting that onto you? It can be envy. They're envious of something, and so if you're the projection carrier of an envy reaction, they will see you as a very negative person, somebody they want to destroy, somebody that envy is a very nasty shadow emotion, and when it's unconscious, it's very dangerous, because people tend to want to destroy the person that they envy, oddly enough, because they feel they can't have what the person has, and so they want to destroy the person who has it. So the poor want to destroy the rich because they envy the rich, and they know they'll never be rich like the rich are rich. So let's bring them down. So that's the envy that drives revolutions often. Beautiful people are often the subject of envy attacks, and they can go into terrible tailspins, and you read about it all the time in the social media. They end up committing suicide, or becoming very depressed, because they feel that the energy. When you're in a toxic energy field, you feel it. And how best to protect yourself? Remove yourself would be the first thing.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
Beautifully put. I think you answered my question.
So,
thank you very much. Thank you.
So I have a list of other people that want to speak. I'm just going to read them out in order. And so I'll call on you in order. First will be Miss Jane. I can't see the beginning of your name. It's something Anushka, maybe Jane. And then Eden Kaner, Gayatri Suresh, Amanda Luzada, Gauri Sharma, and Michelle Chen. Those are the ones I've taken note of, and also Marcia Stables, it seems. So Miss Jane, if you would go ahead and unmute, you can ask your question.
Hello, sir. Hello, Skip, Converse sir and Murray sir. I had a question that, like, as you said, in this social life, people even tend to feel lonely at times, right? Even if they're with their family or their crowd, or in a crowd, they still feel lonely. Like, even during this pandemic, I guess almost all of us are living with our families together. We have time to spend together, but there are people still that feel lonely even though they're with their families. So is it something related to their shadow that they're experiencing, or is it something they've like seen in the past or something that's troubling them from opening up?
Well, if it's painful, then something should be done about it. If it's not painful, one can feel alone in a crowd of people, but not be bothered by it because one's introverted and you'd rather be alone anyway. Feeling alone in a group of people, though, can be very painful. It's easier to be alone if you are truly alone, but if you feel alone in a group, it's more painful than feeling alone when you're solitary, because you feel on the outside. You feel the others have a relationship and there's a nice atmosphere going, but you're locked out of it. So I remember a friend of mine telling me years ago, he would drive down the streets at Christmas in his hometown, and he lived alone at the time. He was divorced, and he saw all the lights on the houses, and he imagined all the wonderful times that people were having with their families in those houses. And he was an outsider and he had no family. So he felt terrible. And I said to him, are you sure that those families are having a lot of fun in there? They might be having a terrible time. And then he remembered his family, said, yeah, that's right. Maybe I'm okay and better off not being in one of those. But when you're an outsider in a group, and you're feeling locked out of the group, that can be a very painful situation. So the question is, are you imagining that? Is it true that the others have some kind of wonderful relationship and you're an outsider, or is that your imagination? Are you projecting that? Are you locking yourself out? Are you holding yourself back? Are you not giving yourself to them? That would be a question to ask. Are you holding yourself away from them? And then you could try, engaging more with them and see if they resist you. Test it. I think often people who feel left out are shy, or they feel like the shadow part would be you don't want to reveal yourself, or you're ashamed of yourself, or that you have some feelings you don't want to share. And so you're holding those back, and that keeps you out of the conversation or out of the group. But I think the more you can open up to them, the less you will feel locked out by them. And try it. And if you see another person who looks locked out, see if you can help them in. Ask them some questions, engage with them, draw them in, play some games with them, something like that. This is a hard time, this pandemic time. People are really being tested. Their families, their relationships, their intimate relationships. It's not easy.
Well, that's for sure. Eden Kaner, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, hello. My question is that I know that water is represents unconscious, right? So I didn't quite understand in what way it does.
I didn't quite catch that.
Neither did I. Could you ask that question again, Eden?
I understood that water represents unconscious, right? in dreams, for example. So I didn't understand in what way it does.
How does the symbol of water represent the unconscious? I think is what she's asking.
Oh, the symbol of water.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is
in
that
dreams.
right? Water?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Generally, water symbolizes the unconscious itself. You know, if you say you're in a dream and you're swimming in water and you're drowning, or you're struggling in water, or it's threatening to overwhelm you, that indicates that your ego is being subjected to a strong influx of material from the unconscious, maybe very strong emotions, overwhelming emotions that you're having a hard time dealing with. If you're swimming well in water, you know, you're in a swimming pool and you're having a good time, you're floating, you're in a good relationship with the unconscious. And then it depends what type of water it is. Is it a swimming pool? Is it a lake? Is it the ocean? You know, small bodies of water we think of as representing the personal unconscious, and big bodies of water like oceans, seas, so on, representing the collective unconscious. So it depends on what kind of water it is, how you're doing in it, what's happening. A river is a beautiful image of water. It flows. It's an image of psychic energy, movement. If you can get into the stream of things, into the flow of energy, you feel good. You feel like you're being creative and living your life well. Water is a very important symbol in our understanding of the psyche.
So Gayatri Suresh, do you have a question? Gayatri Suresh.
Greetings, Dr. Stein. Recently, I have came to know about the law of attraction and how we can manifest or bring changes in our life by affirmations. So I would like to know your take on the subject. Can we really bring changes by affirming some things in our daily lives?
Well, I wouldn't think it's magical. You know, I think there is a Chinese saying that I love to quote, and I've thought about it many times. When the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. So the best thing to do if you want something is prepare yourself to have it. If you want a lover, prepare yourself to be a good lover to the person who shows up. If you want to be a scholar and have a great teacher, start preparing yourself to be a student. If you want to be a rich person, start learning about money and finance and apprentice yourself at a bank or something like that. Prepare yourself for what you want to achieve. But as the saying also goes, be careful what you want, you may get it. Some people want something that looks very attractive, but when they get it, they realize it's not what they thought they wanted, what they thought they were going to get when they wanted it. Wealth is like that, you know. People want wealth if they don't have it. And when they get it, they realize it doesn't satisfy them. They wanted something else that they thought wealth would give them, but that's not it. And the same thing with most of the things we want. Once we get there and we get it, we realize there's something else that was behind that wish. But I wouldn't stop wishing because that's a part of life and a part of learning. Make a list of the things you want and start preparing yourself to have them. And I think the more you prepare, the better your chances are of finding them. When you are ready, they will arrive. In Jungian psychology, we think of synchronicity as being a meaningful coincidence. It's not a causal relationship. It's not because I want it that it happens. But if I really want it, the chances are increased of its happening. Not that I bring it about, but it will fall into my life somehow. And there are many stories about how this happens in life. And often it's when you aren't expecting it that it arrives, but you have to be prepared for it or you won't be able to accept it. So prepare yourself.
So Amanda Luzada, are you still here? If you are, go ahead and ask your question, Amanda. Okay, how about Gauri Sharma? Is she still here?
Hello, I'm Gauri. Nice to meet you, everyone. And first of all, I want to say that I've been waiting for this session for the past 2 days, and I must say it's worth the hype. It was worth the hype. And so my question was coming from the culture where, you know, exploring your inner world or talking about mental health issues is not very much supported. I would want to ask, when the teenagers or like people from my age group, like 18 to 28, they when they start to discover the map of their soul, it might be overwhelming for them. Like ego and persona and shadow are known as two dysfunctional couples, and yeah, so like when they start to discover, it can be overwhelming. So how do you suggest one can cope with that in their journey and not get lost during the exploration of the self?
Well, that's a very good question coming from your culture. But in any culture, depending on your circumstances, I think it's relatively safe to read books, but they can also be very stimulating. And when you start to look at your dreams and recognize persona issues in yourself and the friends around you, it's eye-opening. And you want to share that with somebody else. Now, the good thing that's happened in this world that we live in is that we can make contact with people outside our own communities quite easily through the internet. And there are discussion groups, there are networks of people who are interested in those kinds of topics in psychology, and you can share with them and ask questions and maybe make some long distance friends, so that you don't feel alone in this journey and unsupported, because there's a lot of support in the world, not just from Jungian analysts, but people who read these books and study with people like Skip Connor. They've become very familiar with this territory and this kind of material, and they're in a position to participate in relationships with other people who are looking for support, support groups. So I would reach out, and you don't need to be overwhelmed.
Yeah, the BTSARMY Help Center is one place that is a BTS oriented thing that helps.
Yes.
And of course, this session itself, I've roughly counted, we at one point had 456 people watching either on Zoom or on YouTube. We currently have 201 people on YouTube watching, and we've had people from 5 continents plus India on this discussion. So we can really reach a broad part of the earth when we reach out to people. Michelle Chen has asked a question. So Michelle, you're next. Okay, Michelle is not there. So Marcia Staples, you're next. Staples.
Hi there. Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to speak to you again, Skip and Murray. I'm from BTS Radio UK, and we've spoken to you both a couple of times, so thank you for hosting us again. It's great, and it's been so informative as well. The question, well, I actually have two questions, but I will send the other question privately off of here. What we're interested in, because on our format, on our platform, we actually cover other things than radio. We cover such things as mental health blogging and speaking and doing charitable acts with people like Mind, who are a charity within the UK. What we're quite interested in is if there's any writings or any sort of in-depth discussion or work into the possibility of the shadow, let's say the negative part of the shadow being the more dominant side here, overshadowing the persona and disrupting the overall balance of the psyche, and how to pull that back.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's a way to try and pull it back and actually being very self-aware of that, if you get me.
Yeah. Well, the shadow has many levels and layers to it. You know, there's a kind of mild form of the shadow, but whenever you touch shadow in yourself and you realize shadow, you feel what we call shame or guilt, because you realize that there is a part of your personality and your behavior active outside of your awareness often. And it's like when you see yourself in a mirror, suddenly you recognize something that you hadn't taken into account. And it usually isn't a very nice thing in the shadow. Now, we also talk about positive shadow. Those would be aspects of the personality that have been left out for some particular reason in your upbringing that was not allowed space in your life and was kept in the shadow. And so there's energy tied up in this positive shadow feature. And when you discover that, or you release the energy from that, it can have an uplifting effect. But generally, when you realize shadow, you're realizing something about your selfishness, your greed, your egotism, your insensitivity to other people, things you've said and done that you regret, but you can't undo. The best thing to do, and it's a hard thing to do, is to try to make amends. This is one of the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, for instance, which was also inspired by Jung. The person who founded Alcoholics Anonymous had been in analysis with Jung. And one of the steps is to make amends to the people that you've hurt in your alcoholism. Alcoholics don't realize they're hurting people because they're more or less unconscious of their behavior while they're drunk anyway, and they're drunk a lot of the time. And when they're sober, they don't want to look at it. But when they sober up and they go into AA and treatment and so on, they come upon themselves and they come upon their shadow. And then what to do about it? Well, you can feel terrible about it. You do for a while, but the next and important step is to make amends and to try to help the person that you've damaged or hurt, a family member or a loved one, something of that sort, to make apologies and make amends. So, and that will clear it up usually, so that you don't have to go on feeling ashamed and guilty for the rest of your life, unless it's something that is so terrible that you need to carry that shadow for the rest of your life, and you will. But that is then a part of your history, and you have to weave that in to the larger narrative of your history, which isn't all shadow. So what happens when you get overwhelmed by shadow is you forget everything else about yourself momentarily. And there's a lot of you that isn't shadow. There's a lot of you that's good, that's kind, that's helpful, that's a different kind of person and personality. And so when you can step back from the shadow and include that in the whole picture, then it's balanced by the other parts that are not corrupted by the shadow. And And it really does help a lot to make amends, to repair the damage that's been done, if that's possible, if not just to apologize. I know that in my own experience, when I've received apologies from other people, I feel very differently about them than when they don't apologize. And it repairs the relationship, and you can then go forward. So I think that's a very important step to take.
So Carol Pico, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm actually her daughter, Emily. So I would like to ask the question. Hello, everybody. Hello, Mr. Stein, Mr. Skip. So I would like to ask the question regarding, you mentioned you'd like to see BTS perhaps explore synchronicity within their work, in their future work, hopefully. Have you seen any evidence of them maybe exploring that topic? And can you speak to that topic more? I've experienced it a lot in my personal life, and so has my mom and my dad, synchronistic events or whatnot.
Yes.
I've to hear that.
It's a kind of synchronicity, I think, that BTS found Jung. I don't know how that happened, but synchronicity is a meaningful accident or coincidence. A book drops into your lap, or somebody says something, and that sets you off in a certain direction. And then in retrospect, you see how important that was. So maybe synchronicity, I find, is around BTS. I don't know, it's a strange thing. When they sang about Black Swan, remember that song that was in, I think, the second album, Black Swan, yeah, The Shadow, and they portrayed it in that beautiful ballet film that they made.
Yeah.
That was just before, that was recorded just before COVID-19 became a pandemic. And when I commented on that to somebody in a discussion, I said, isn't that an amazing coincidence that they sang about this Black Swan event, and then we get it in the world? A Black Swan event is when something happens that nobody anticipated.
Right.
And it's catastrophic, it's huge. Nobody anticipated this pandemic. I mean, there were people who were talking about possible pandemics someday, maybe, yes, but that it would come and disrupt the world as much as it has. This is a black swan.
Yeah. I want to let me go back to Marcia Staples again, because Marcia had another question.
I haven't quite finished with this about synchronicity.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I could
go ahead.
Say another few words about it. And that what synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence between two happenings, either an inner happening like a dream or a thought, and an outer happening, like you prepare yourself as a student and a teacher shows up, something like that. That's a synchronicity. It's an acausal connection. And these are very important moments in life. They're often turning points in life. They're and the thing to do with them is to look at their meaning. What do they mean? What are they telling you? What is the message in this? Because it comes from somewhere else. It doesn't come from your consciousness, from your intention. It doesn't come even from your unconscious. It comes from the world. It comes from something behind the scenes. And that gives you a feeling of there's a hidden hand at work behind the world, behind the events of the world. Yeah. And
yes, it's happening frequently, almost every other day, if not multiple times a week. So it's very, very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah. So Marcia, did you have another question? Then I'll go on with the list.
Okay, thank you so much for coming back to me. I really appreciate that. My other question was around BTS and about mainly the reluctance of people wanting to expand on their knowledge of BTS, and like for us particularly, because we sort of circle ourselves around radio stations, the reluctance of people to play BTS on the radio. could there be a psychological factor of the people who are, let's say, in charge of the radio stations and of the powerful media companies? Is it a psychological thing? Is it a monetary one? Just for the number of requests that they do get to play it, is it about being open-minded? Is there something that's closing their minds to psychologically to playing BTS? Is that something that you've ever thought about or has ever come across?
Well, I'm surprised to hear it because BTS is so popular. In the charts and everything, you'd think they'd want to be playing it. Is that a peculiarity of the UK, or is that true with other?
It's worldwide. In the UK market is very, very tough, very tough. The US has played significantly more BTS songs. However, that being said, still not the same as what a Western artist would have. So
yeah, language might be an issue on the radio. I think if you can see them perform, and then with subtitles, you get the message. But if they're singing in Korean, that may be an obstacle.
I think it's more so the fact that the overwhelming response from the fans of requests. So fans will request in tens of thousands. A Western artist fan won't request because they're guaranteed the play regardless
of
what the song is. The song could mean absolutely anything.
Yeah.
These songs are actually very, very positive songs, very, very changing songs and things for the people that you would want people to hear.
Yeah.
However, tens of thousands of people have requested it, yet it does not match.
That to me is a mystery. You'd have to talk to the radio people about that. I don't understand, except it might be the language issue or but if the fans are demanding it and they will listen to that radio station, you'd think they'd want to play it.
Yeah, you'd think so.
All we wondered is if there was some sort of possibility of a psychological reason behind, and you did mention the language barrier.
I don't know if there would be a cultural prejudice against Koreans. I don't know of such in the United States anyway. I don't know of anything like that. Or against Asian groups. I don't know.
So I promised Murray that we would finish up by 9 p.m. his time, which is 7 minutes from now. We have at least three more questioners here. So let us make quick questions if possible. Is Ruby Clark still there? Ruby Clark?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, sorry, I had to mute myself. I just wanted to ask what your take is on the butterfly effect and why BTS, for instance, have referenced it so much in their work. Is there quite a connection with that and Map of the Soul? That's, yeah.
The butterfly effect?
Yeah.
Can you just say a little bit more about that? I've got two things going in my mind. I'm wondering what you mean.
No, that's fine. They've referenced it in quite a few music videos, and they also have a webtoon where it's referenced heavily. And it's just them speaking about how small events can influence a bigger, more complex system.
Right. So the butterfly effect, the butterfly flaps its wings in China, and there's a huge tornado in Kansas or something like that.
Yeah.
Jung believed in the butterfly effect, let me put it that way, in this sense that if the individual works, an individual is one of, how many people on the planet now, 7 billion or something, works intensively on herself or himself, it will have an effect on the world. Now, it won't change the world, won't transform the world, but it will have effects on the environment, and sometimes very surprising ones. And the reason for that is that Jung felt that if you work deeply, you come into contact with a level of reality that is what he called the collective unconscious, or even beneath the collective unconscious, that is not limited by your individual life history or your experience or your location, and that you can have effects on the world in the future or in the present time that you have no idea about. You don't know that it's happening or that it is having such an effect. And Jung felt quite strongly that if enough people, individuals, do this kind of work on themselves, he called it individuation process, that it will have a big transformative effect on the whole, on the global scene. He didn't say how many people had to be doing it, but I think he put quite a bit of faith in that. I do too. I think, and I think it's growing. I think there's a wave of interest around the world in the psyche and psychic reality and the deeper levels of psychic reality. And that as we come into contact with those, we'll come into contact with each other in a new way. What we need to look for is a sense of global community. Global community. And that is a reality at some level. We just have to bring it out more into consciousness, that unity that exists, but we're so caught up in our ego world, let's say, and in our immediate material world that we don't experience that. So if you get in touch with that world, and enough people do, a global community will be constellated, and that will be very strong against counter forces. It will overwhelm the counter forces once it gets going. It will be a big wave.
Right. It's even said that if we get 70% of the population immune to COVID, then COVID will be under control. We can hope. Diane Mata, you're here. If you're here, Diane.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm actually asking for other people their questions. One of them is from Sushri Ankita Jana. What does one do when one is aware about their potential, their desires, but the will to set out and do those things is just non-existent? What does one do about this stagnant yet a state of constant friction within one's mind? For one, it takes a toll on the mind itself. Also, is it the Hamletian dilemma of to be or not to be? How deep can Yeah, I think that's the question.
Well, I think the answer to that is don't give up. Hang on to your truth and your inner truth and your potential and keep working on it. And in the end, it will bear results. There will be results. But you have to be tough, you have to be strong, you have to be determined, and have a vision, and love yourself, as BTS teaches, and just keep going. You will have an effect on the world around you, and you will be recognized.
Okay. I also have like another quick question. I'll just summarize it. This one is from Koru R. So since 2015, BTS has been releasing notes, discussing the messages of their songs. Recently the notes part 2 has been announced to release, where their conflicts have actually not been resolved and are leading to finding the map of the soul instead. Do you think finding the map of the soul and pursuing that journey can be an answer to a person's internal and external conflict?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So I have one more questioner on my list, and then I just want to mention that we have Joe Mellick here, Dr. Jill Mellick, who is the author of Jung's Red Book, Hours, who is going to speak to us a week from today. And so if Jill is here, I'd love to have her introduce her work. But Pragyam Gupta, I have you on the list, so just ask your question quickly, please.
Yeah. Hello, good evening, everyone. Sir, my question is like BTS is basically a band who has been constantly showing their love and gratitude towards their fans. And it is very rare to see nowadays because we live in a world where people saying a mere thank you to someone is a huge deal. So this is a band which said that you guys made us appreciate ourselves, and we would love to, and we would really hope that we could be able to make you love yourselves. So what do you think that what might have been an influencing factor in their lives where they actually came out as so appreciative to the fans and to be so, you know, grateful to this whole community? Because we don't see this anywhere else.
Yes, I'm also amazed because I think somehow the BTS has stimulated a great love for them among the BTS army. It's almost like a marriage, certainly like a love affair between BTS and the army. I think they support each other and they're very devoted to each other. And I think that has an effect on the world too, that devotion and that love that passes between BTS and its army followers back and forth, and respect and gratitude has a positive effect on the world around. Okay, Skip, I think I'm going to have to go.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir.
We will stay here for a little bit longer because we have a number of questions which perhaps some of the rest of us can respond to. But I did promise Dr. Stein that he would only be required to be here for 2 hours. And I hear your voice going a little bit, Mary, so I appreciate you staying for 2 hours very much.
Pleasure, Skip, and all of you. Nice seeing you, and good luck to all of you on your journeys.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we do have a number of mental health professionals that are still online, plus a fairly large number of my advanced reading group are also here. So perhaps some of us can still answer a few of your questions. And is Jill Mellick still here? I don't hear her. Okay. So let me just mention that 1 week from today at the same hour, Dr. Jill Mellick will be appearing. And Dr. Mellick, what she did, she's done a lot with art over the years, and she's a Jungian analyst. And she's written a book called Jung's Red Book, Hours. And it's just a remarkable book. Maybe Tim Holmes would say something about it, but she will be here 1 week from today at 1 p.m. and we hope you'll all join us. Tim, do you have any thoughts about the Red Book Hours at all? I didn't prep you for.
Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's a fascinating look at the kind of the context of where he wrote this book and what his house was like, and his circumstances at the time, and a lot of work about the techniques and the paints that he used and so forth. It's a little bit more focused on art than probably people, or the materials than people would be, than a general audience would be interested in. But if people are interested in the Red Book, it is a fascinating study.
Right. And I find it very interesting because she talks about what must have been going through Jung's mind in some of those situations. And, you know, that's helpful, very helpful for us to have a perspective on it. Okay, and the other thing I want to mention while we have a good group here is that beginning tomorrow, I will be launching a 1-year teaching on the tarot as a roadmap for life, as opposed to a divination technique. And that will begin tomorrow at 8 p.m. And tomorrow's topic is the Empress card. For those of you who may have interest in the tarot and how that fits into all of the things we've been discussing. And Eva Ryder, who's been here with us today, will also be talking about the tarot on the 29th of August. And Melissa Townsend spoke to us last night. So that's available on YouTube, on the YouTube homepage today. And so let me go through and see what other questions there are. We have quite a number from attendees, and I'm still trying to admit attendees, but is Hele Bhattacharjee here? I'm going to allow you to talk if you want to ask a question.
Hi. Hello, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Yes, I'd like to ask a question, and it's just a continuation of what Dr. Murray was speaking about regarding the individuation process. And I'd like to, if you would allow me to speak a bit about my anecdotal experience with it.
Okay. Sure.
I was a very reductionist materialist, and coming into Jung's work, I was very skeptical and very how could I put it? Very skeptical and very I guess very I had a negative outlook of it, because synchronicity could be defined in a million ways, and you can just say that basically a man's focus is on a certain topic, so he sees it everywhere, like the blue elephant experiment, where you'd see everything that's blue around you if you close your eyes. But in my career as an athlete, I've come across Jung's work about just the beginning of the Corona crisis. So let's say by March, February, and just prior to then, aloof to basically the concept of individuation, I started individuating myself. And I supplemented with Jung's work and other psychoanalysts, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that it does have biological, physiological, and exponential effects on me in my athletic career, which I am just dumbfounded. I just came back from a test I take, which measures basically certain blood biomarkers and athletic and physical abilities. And albeit I haven't been switching my training modality, and I haven't been doing anything that's any different, but my results have about tripled within a month, or within a few months, sorry. So I cannot explain this other than basically synchronicity and individuation. I guess it's mind over matter. And that's my input, which is not a question, and I apologize for that, but I'd like to just share my experience with it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think all of us who have been heavily into the individuation process would concur with you entirely. And so let me see if there's other hands up here.
Well,
folks.
there's also, I'm so sorry to interrupt. My apologies,
ahead.
Mr.
Go
Conover,
ahead.
but there's also about 40 questions in the Q&A
Okay.
that has been sitting there. And I'm sure tons of people are kind of like, when's my question going to be answered?
Okay, well, it's hard to keep up with everything. We have 2 chats going on and questions in the Q&A. So if you'd like to ask some of those questions, by all means, we'll do our best to respond to them. I am in the process of also admitting people, and some of my fellow group members could respond perhaps. So go ahead, Natalia. Is it you that's speaking there?
Sure, yeah, I don't mind. So I'm just going to pick a random question from the 40 that are here. So from Piper Na, it's my niece is 15 and loves BTS. She's an introvert. Which Jung books can I suggest that she starts reading first, second, etc.? These are the books I have available to share with her: Persona, Ego, Shadow, Jung's Map of the Soul, and Map of the Soul in the World of BTS.
Yeah, I mean, those are fine books to start out with, and especially if you're 15. I mean, Dr. Jung generally didn't think people were even ready for his ideas until they were 40, and he by and large didn't even want to think about, although he did do a book about child psychology, but he didn't really do much with psychology until the midlife crisis. And so I think working with the BTS lyrics and working with Dr. Especially these books that Dr. Stein has prepared now through Chiron, those are excellent opening books that aren't terribly, not terribly intellectual in a negative kind of way. I mean, they're still, you have to think, but there's still simpler way of doing it. So I would recommend that. Do others have any thoughts on that? Anybody else?
Skip, that brings up another question I've been sitting on here by Priyanshi, who asks, do you think it's risky to expose a young audience to Jung's concepts?
Did you want to answer that, Tim?
Well, I don't think it's ever risky to, because essentially what he's doing is trying to open up the inner world. And there, of course, there are shadow elements of anybody's personality that are frightening. And there is in very, very few cases a kind of danger of sinking into psychosis without help. But anytime somebody gets curious about what's going on inside, there's almost nothing but treasure to be found there, even if it's hard to deal with, even if it's scary to look at your own material. It's the individuation process is what our life's goal is, really, as a psychic person. And so the more you can understand about yourself, the more easily you'll deal with the problems of life.
Right. I noticed that we had in the attendee list here, Lauren Patton. Is that by any chance the Lauren Patton that is involved with Middlebury College? And if it is, would you uncloak yourself, or even if it's not, say hello to us so we can identify you? Is Lauren Patton there?
Hi. No, sorry. I'm just a college student.
Well, that's good. College students are also good. The reason I asked that question is that Lori Patton is the translator of the Bhagavad Gita, one of the versions I've been reading. And so I just wanted to see if it was the same person. Yeah, go ahead, Joss.
Yes. Hi, I'm Joss from Hawaii, and I'm a retired psychiatrist. And I just wanted to throw in a little bit on the tail end of Tim Holmes. You were answering that question for that one listener who was asking about, is there any risk to going into Jung's material? Well, for number one, I think a lot of you folks are out here because you guys are BTS fans. And why do you love them? Well, because like Dr. Stein said, their message and their mission is all about love. And if anything, we need to spread and disperse the whole message of love. So if we can internalize it and work on our individuation on an individual basis, we are, in effect, getting into the butterfly effect, are we not? So we are contributing to the collective unconscious. So kudos to you ARMY people out there. Awesome. So keep it up. You know, open the gates for all the people who have questions and are concerned about what they're going through in their, you know, stage of young adult development and moving towards maturity. Yay, that's great. So all the more, like Dr. Stein said, hang in there, you know, hold on to your truth, stay truthful to yourself, be authentic. And if anything, find a buddy to share your thoughts with and your emotions with. So that would be your buddy system. So just keep it up. Remember now, these BTS guys they're apostles. That's the word that Stein used to spread the message of love. Take that treasure, that wisdom, and share it to the world. This is of great importance. And if anything, this would give you folks meaning in your life. You're looking for meaning in your life? Well, this is it. Spread love.
That's right.
Spread love, okay?
Yeah. And I would add one other thing. One of the issues about the individuation process is that in general, it's said that you shouldn't embark on it until you have a strong ego. But I can tell you from my experience with the BTS armies that there's plenty of strong ego in the BTS army, because you're having to face people who are criticizing you all the time, perhaps because they don't understand what BTS is about. And
yes,
so you've already developed a strong ego. And one of the verses of the Bible that Dr. Jung always referred to is about this two spirits that are coming up in your psyche. And that verse is 1 John, the first letter of John, chapter 4, verse 1, which is examine the spirit whether they be of God, or examine the spirits whether they be of God. And since we are always, our psychic energy comes from opposites, we're always tempted with something that's not so good and something that's good. And so you can always ask yourself, is this something I really would want my grandchildren to know about? And is this something that I really want to have in my society for my grandchildren? Those are a couple of great questions to just determine. And the fact is that if you think about those, if you make yourself conscious about that question of the two spirits, then you're going to make the right choice more often than not. Because think about it, everything in your room, if you look around your room right now, every single thing that's there, somebody at some point thought was good. And therefore they created it, and you thought it was good, and therefore you put it in your room with yourself. And the things that weren't so good are not in your room. Or if they've outlived their life in your room, they should be leaving your room. And so you know, I think that most of the people that I know from the BTS Army have a strong enough ego to examine their souls, and that's what I would say. Any other thoughts from
Skip?
Yeah, go ahead.
Iman,
I would recommend Demian as a book. I don't think you can see this, but back in the Wings era, BTS produced a whole series of videos,
Right.
and they referred to Demian by Hermann Hesse. I don't know if you can, I think my shadow's off here, but you can't see it. Anyway, I would suggest that they read Demian. That was on BTS's reading list, by the way.
Yeah, and
When they
that
first
was
came out, along with Mary Stein's Map of the Soul. And so if you trace, you can go back and see all the videos of BTS from when they first started 7 years ago and follow this progression. And I think that's very valuable to do that. And
right. I think Meretz can tell us what the Demian was from the Wings album era, which was before they really came into Jung directly. But if Meretz is here, maybe she can tell us, confirm that it's from the Wings era.
Yes, it is from the Wings era, but I think that they also got inspiration from Damien to the school era too. Not only the Wings era, school classrooms, school. They had an era more about the school teaching students, and I think that Damien is present there too.
Okay, thank you
And
so much.
they explored better in the Wings era.
Yeah,
and the Love Yourself era was based on other books too, but mainly in the Art of Loving from Eric Fromm.
Right.
Damien, The Art of Loving, and Jung's Map of the Soul were the three books that Big Hit sold at the Big Hit shop.
Yeah.
It's like they were telling us, go read those three books for now.
Yes. Ahali Bhattacharjee, are you still there? You have your hand up.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
So I actually had a question. When we talk to others, we tend to have different personas. Like if I talk to my mother, I am portraying a self of mine to her that I know I am. But then again, when I'm with someone else, I am a different person.
Yes.
And it comes naturally to me. So it's not a problem when I don't realize it and I'm doing it. But then I come back home and then some days I think that I was a completely different person with two other people who I talk to separately. And so that makes me think, which one am I? Like, I struggle to actually feel connected to myself and I just question myself that is this, am I faking some of it or is all of that me?
I think most people would say all of that is you for different purposes. I mean, when I wear my Marine Corps uniform, I'm quite different from the way I am when I'm wearing my BTS uniform. and that's not a bad thing as long as you know you're doing that. It's not important for others to know that you're doing that. It's only important for you to know. And so if you know you're doing it, then it's okay. Especially if you know you're doing it. And, all the mental health professionals that are here, Joss and others, please speak up if you think I'm wrong about that.
Well, you know what it is? It's all about balance. And we learn to straddle both sides, the inner world and the outer world. That's what all Jung was about too, is to try to merge the conscious and the unconscious and blend it together so that we were able to balance ourselves in this world. You know, we are here on this world for a purpose, and that purpose is to feel and be alive, and to really just appreciate life for all its interesting and diverse aspects of it. And yes, it can be a chore, but that's what we're learning. We're all learning, no matter what age we are.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we learn to be problem-solving creatures, and then we solve problems for the rest of our lives. I know I solve at least 100 problems a day, and so that's life. That's the way it is. And so when you're young, you're only just learning how to solve problems and getting a perspective on it, and later on you can solve problems better for people as you get older. And then you get old like me, and then people don't want to listen to you. They say, that old fogey, you know. Other questions?
Skip, there's one here from the chat from Beatrice, who wants to know about the Schumann resonance theory. And what relationship does that have with the collective unconscious? I don't know about the Schumann resonance theory. Do you?
I don't know anything about that.
Huh.
So Christian Lemma, are you there? And do you want to ask a question? You have your hand up.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Go ahead.
I would like to start off with saying this webinar has made me so proud of being an ARMY. So my question is, as a teenager in high school, I'm very foreign to psychology, but BTS has slowly exposed me to it and ignited my curiosity. And I think we can all agree that adolescence is a very difficult stage for some, especially emotionally. So I don't know if this question has been asked before, but how would you recommend that people like me start their journey to finding themselves and the map of their soul?
My suggestion is to get into something creative, and Tim might want to expand on that. But the important issue is that you have to start hearing yourself think. And that means, sure, listen to BTS a lot, but also turn off the radio and listen to yourself. And if you start to do creative things, yourself is going to start talking to you. And that's what you want to do. So in my case, I make an omelet for my wife every single morning, or maybe not every morning, but 5 days a week, I make an omelet for my wife. And just the process of putting that omelet together gets my creative self going so that I can hear myself communicating with me. But it doesn't matter what you're interested in. You could be interested in painting or sculpture or cooking or building furniture, as Jerome Waddle is, or as Tim is interested in metal and metallurgy and clay and all sorts of things. So go to a store, go to a store that supports what you're interested in, whether it's a cooking supply store or Michael's art store or a craft store or the Sears tool department, if there are any left. And just go up and down the aisles and see what speaks to you. Something will say, geez, I'd really like to try that, take that home. Now, that may not be the thing that you want all of your life. And Dr. Jung was into painting, sculpture. He was carving stone. He was a stonemason, and he was writing books. He was a writer. But whatever that store is, go to that store and pick something. And then if it's not the right thing a few months later, then go to it, do it again until gradually you'll find what the right thing is for you. Tim, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I'm a professional artist, and I've done art ever since I was a kid. And I'm always encouraging people to do what Skip is talking about, just be creative in whatever way you can. But some people feel kind of intimidated by that. And I would say, just try to write something, some bad poetry, or sing a bad song, or write just a dialogue about anything that comes into your head. It doesn't have to be brilliant. It doesn't have to be a story. It doesn't have to conform to any kind of artistic form at all. It's just a way of you opening up your soul to a piece of paper. You don't have to share it with anybody, put it in your journal, write it down, throw it away. But just getting the dialogue going inside your own head is a really good way to access that. Virtus, just raise your hand.
Yes, I would like to reinforce that BTS always also recommended us to be creative. When they released their book, The Notes, they gave us as a pre-order gift a blank notebook where you can draw, you can write. So they were saying, fill it with you, write, draw, do, be creative. I think that was the message of the gift.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, other questions?
I want to say something also aligned with this. I was listening to the automatic habit on the way back from Glacier Park. And it's also mentioned there are two groups taking photos. And one group there gave grade based on the quality of the photos. The other one grade based on the amount of photo they take. Actually, in the end, they found the second group actually creates much more quality pictures because they just, by doing a lot of work, they actually was able to create better work instead of focus too much on getting the perfect picture. So that's really a good lesson for everyone. So I have the same problem. When I try to draw, I cannot find time to do a nice picture. Just form a habit to draw every day, then the quality will improve.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Karina, you have your hand up. Karina OC, you have your hand up.
Hello.
Hello,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was interested in how about the unconscious bias and how it's affecting persona. So how the external world, for example, have given like racism and patriarchy and developed the persona, but it actually lies also, is it on the shadow? Like how, if you want, like, for example, like to change the world, like how do we find the unconscious bias to like, for example, if we want to fight like patriarchy or racism, like how do we work on this map of the soul?
Well, you're already doing it, Carlina, with just by being a BTSARMY. You're working on changing the world, and the key is to be able to listen to yourself, to get out of your own way and listen to your own unconscious. And that was the very interesting thing that's in Jill Mellick's book that we're going to talk about next week, where she is talking about all the different tricks that Dr. Jung used to get out of his own way. And so when he was concentrating on doing his calligraphy, for example, he was also letting his unconscious speak to him. And, one of the big mistakes that young people make is that they always go around with something in their ears. They're always listening to some music or something. But when you do that, you can't hear yourself. And so you need to find some quiet time also when you can just listen. And I know it's a temptation. I know until I was 40 years old, I couldn't stand to be in the car without music on or news or something on the radio to make noise. And then something, I just didn't feel right about it. And so I suddenly turned off the radio, and now I almost never have it on unless either I'm having a telephone call or I'm listening to an Audible book where I'm learning something, then I do that. But but otherwise, I just don't listen to music anymore. But you know, that's an old fogey type of issue. But you have to find a time, a way that you can step back from the chaos and just let yourself think. And that's why I'm going to be doing the tarot as a roadmap for life, because not for divination purposes. I've already done that. And if you're interested in divination, you can find those videos on my YouTube channel. But this is to give you a way to face the fact that life is hugely chaotic right now. I mean, we have a situation where we have, and this is a statistic that I often use, but we are recipients of way more information than our ancestors ever had. 400 years ago, the average human being only received as much information in a lifetime as we now get in the Sunday New York Times, which is it's a fairly thick newspaper, but one edition. So just think of that. One edition of the New York Times that you see at 7-Eleven or something like that. That's all the information that a person would get in a whole lifetime 400 years ago. And now we've opened up the internet so that, except for company and government secrets, we have access to everything in the world, all information, and it's just too much. And so you need to develop a capacity to take that ball of chaos that's out there on the other side of your computer and hold it out at arm's length, and then listen to yourself and hear yourself. If you do that, you'll do more than anything else. I mean, in the East, they call that meditation, but here we can call it prayer, or we can call it using the tarot as a guidebook for life, as a roadmap for life, or using the lyrics of BTS for that purpose. That's what a lot of people are doing. So I urge you to just think of that concept of, okay, we've got all this chaos here. It's in a red ball, and we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to put it over in the corner of the room for a bit of the time each day, and just listen to ourselves think. That's my suggestion. Any other comments?
I have something to say. Earlier you were saying how you find things like more peaceful and more calm when things are silent. I find it weird how anytime I'm in silence, I sort of tend to get tense more, and I always need something or some kind of sound to be in the background whenever I'm trying to create things or write or draw. I'm not sure if that has something to do with maybe something in the past, or like experiences that I've had that I repressed. I'm not sure if that has to do with the shadow or not.
Well, it may do. Let me ask Tim. Tim, do you have music playing when you're doing your work, or?
Well, one thing that kind of frustrates me is we live in a very, very noisy society. And when I was a kid, I think about the watching TV. There's like a 5-second period before people start to lose their attention. So they make clips to fit this certain time frame. And since then, that period has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. So people are used to really fast-paced everything. You look at a trailer for a movie or something, everything is very fast-paced and loud and comes at you a lot. And getting overstimulated like that really kind of drives you crazy. And we all need time to just relax and be by ourselves without any kind of input. And that's what meditation is about. And people aren't really very good at it in our culture. It takes a lot of effort to become quiet enough to hear yourself think. And sometimes when I work, I listen to music because my left brain, the cognitive sort of organized part of my brain, needs something to do. So I put my left brain into a room with the babysitter, which is music or something. And it allows my right brain to be free and to work on artwork without being disturbed by all this chatter. And so the answer I would give is it's a little of both. I want to be sure I give myself time in silence to be able to hear my own heartbeat. But then sometimes when I work, I want music just to babysit that left part of the brain.
It's a good way to think about it.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting. I want to say something because my son, who's 15 years old, who also, he keep listening to music and even chatting when he's doing work. And we were very worried about him. But then I reading this book about teen brain, they actually mentioned as teenager, their brain is super developed. They actually need some kind of things to calm them down. Actually, the music is kind of calm their brain down. So I just want to add that. Maybe that's part of the reason for their age.
Well, I think it's very interesting, the right brain, left brain idea that Tim just said also. I think there's something to that. I mean, I do listen to music sometimes as a mood setter, not because I want to sing along with the music, but as a mood setter for whatever my artistic activity is at the moment. And so I think that that's fine. Let's see.
There's a question on the chat that I think is really interesting. Sahana Murali, do you want to speak it, or do you want me to read it for you? Are you on? Well, anyway, the question is, I identify myself as an introvert, and I tend to be more into thinking or analyzing myself or relating things to me and putting myself in other situations. And I challenge myself to see growing through that. And yes, more after BTS. But I don't get much dreams. I always wonder why I don't get as many dreams. But lately, I see that extroverted people get more dreams. And that's weird. And they are scared to analyze or open up the door to the inner world. They're scared of thinking about the negativity inside them. I think I would say that dreaming isn't about extroversion, introversion. It's about paying attention. And a lot of people have a hard time remembering their dreams. But if you can take a moment when you wake up and just try to capture the mood or a face or an action that comes from your dream and just hang on to it in your memory, that helps kind of exercise those memory muscles. And you're able to remember your dreams better as you go along. And what I do, what a lot of people do, is write down dreams and sometimes do a drawing of what happened, just so that you pay attention more to that part of your character, that part of your psyche. And then that dreamer that makes a dream realizes that you're taking them seriously, and so they sort of come around more. And to me, that's a helpful way of approaching dream work.
Right. So let's see. Payoshi Pal, Payoshni Pal, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, hi. So it's been a pleasure in this panel. Thank you all. So I have a few questions. There is a follow-up question to the last few discussions we have. Okay, so first, the last discussion we had about thinking about yourself and meditating. So when we think about ourselves and meditate, what about going into the overthinking phase? Then that makes the mind a chaos in itself. Then how to stop that?
Well, that's what you need to get away from, I think. And it's never easy, but prayer is one way. Dr. Jung had a dream or a vision early in his life where he was carrying a candle, and he was going along, and it was a windy night, so he was trying to protect the flame of that candle. And behind him was a dark shadow that was chasing him. And he understood from the dream that he had to protect that flame as long as he could. And that flame is actually ourself. It's the central part of ourselves. And so you need to invent for yourself a way to, first of all, be aware of your flame, and then how are you going to protect it from too much wind, because we have lots of wind in our life these days. And so I guess that's what I would say. Other thoughts here?
I would add to that a lot of times a voice from inside is kind of like a visitor that really wants to see you, and they'll politely ring the doorbell, and if you don't answer, then they'll bang on the door, and if you don't answer that, they'll come over and they'll bang on the window. And so sometimes that chatter can be reduced just by paying attention to it. And so what I'll do is, if I get the sort of insistent chatter, I'll go to my journal and I'll start writing and just see what comes out. And a lot of times that's enough pressure to allow that voice to shut up and leave me alone. Let me do my stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I had one more question about how Dr. George talked about the purpose. So we have all the purpose of reading this Jung's theories and everything. So what is the purpose of being a best of your inside of you, or making your thoughts, propagating your thoughts into others and making them a better person of themselves? But that again makes you a manipulator of their emotions and thoughts. So
Well, that's the idea, to be conscious of these things. You need to bring things into consciousness so that you can react to them. And so, yes, you are a manipulator in a way. But if you're conscious of things, then that consciousness will tend to direct you in the correct direction. I mean, just think of everything that's in the room with you right now. Everything that's there was made by someone who thought it was good, and you purchased it because you thought it was good, or your parents purchased it because they thought it was good. And so all those decisions were for the good. Okay, you don't have anything in your house that you think is evil. Presumably, I mean, most people don't, unless you're an evil person. So I just urge you to bring these things into consciousness, and let life choose the better way. That's the way Dr. Jung used to put it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, Skip, I would just want to add, yes, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think what you're bringing up, Payoshni, the feelings of uncertainty when bring things up and so forth. That's, and Skip is absolutely right. You know, number one, don't overthink, just bring things up. It's about self-discovery and bringing it to your awareness. And then what happens is synchronicity. You know, things start to happen. It's meaningful coincidences that start to arrive. So part of it is having faith in yourself, and to develop that faith in yourself, you need to go inward. And Dr. Stein said, hang in there to your truth, find your truth, and be strong, be confident that life will present itself in a positive way for you. Eventually, you might have some shadow parts coming in, but just hang in there. Things will get better. You have to have that faith in yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have to get into life, and you know, often we get into life because we end up having children, or you know, whatever it is. I've actually gotten down to one person who's in the attendee group who I haven't been able to bring into the panel as yet, and that person is Koru R. And I apologize. At the Naval Academy, it was always a great honor to be the anchor man. And so just by the way things went today, I'm apologizing for not being able to bring you into the group yet, but I will do as soon as only one other person doesn't stay. But anyway, is Carol Pico still asking a question, or do you have another question? And how about Manahil Razak? Do you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, you mentioned the importance of listening to yourself before. So for the longest time, I wrote in a journal, and I think that was a great way to sort of gather my thoughts in one place. But just as BTS mentioned in their song Black Swan, the sort of losing passion for something that you love. I feel like recently I haven't been able to write in that way, and haven't been able to pick up any other hobby. So what would you say to people who are going through something like that?
I don't know, ideas? Pick up anything. You know, even if you don't think you're interested in it, the first thing that comes to hand, pick it up. And if it's a pencil and paper, write a quote that you like on that pencil and paper, and just start something moving in your psyche. I think that's...
if I can say something.
Sorry, go ahead, Jung.
Okay, yeah, so I think you may change, you know, like at one time I was taking this drawing class. I love drawing, that's why I become architect. But somehow I lost interest in drawing, it become a work and burden. So I always want to draw, and I can draw well. I just think there's something I need to develop. Then I take this class. At a certain time, it just hit me, you know, like when I relax, have no purpose, I can draw so much better. And then I was busy cooking for my kids. I don't have time to draw anymore. I was like, I think when you switch, it's all work out together eventually, you know, so it's all creativity and they help each other. So I don't think you need to stick with one thing. If you lost interest, explore something else. And then you can come back to it with a new freshness and new insight. It may help you even better. Tim, maybe you have... yeah.
Yes, because writing has been something that for years I've loved. So it's kind of weird to go through a phase where I cannot focus on it. Like, it's not like I hate it or it's a burden to me, but it's just a time when I cannot focus. And I try to pick up other hobbies, but I can't focus on them as well as much.
Well, Let me address that a little bit. There are a lot of different ways of approaching that kind of blockage, but one of the things that I think is really important for access to any kind of inner issue is to follow your emotion. So usually for me, that's on one end of the scale or the other. I either hate something voraciously or I'm really in love with something. And it doesn't matter what the subject is. Like, I get really irritated about some political issue. And it's the emotion itself that triggers my awareness that there's some aspect of my unconscious is trying to come out. So, if I fall in love with some figure I see on TV or something like that, I want to try to figure out what is that about. It's something inside me that I can't see that has been illuminated, and so I'll do whatever I need to do to try to enlarge that emotion. And for me, it's oftentimes writing if I don't want to draw. But for a writer, when that happens, it might be something else. It might be dancing. It might be going through a magazine and just cutting out pictures that speak to you and collaging them together. Just something that helps honor the fact that your inner life is active. And even though you're in a blockage, by paying attention to it, it will come alive even more.
Absolutely. Felicia Sugiharto, do you have a question? You have your hand
Yes,
up.
thank you for the chance. I was trying to ask a question but to Dr. Stein, but I didn't get a chance to. It's very simple. How can trauma penetrate our map of the soul?
How can what penetrate?
How can trauma penetrate our map of the soul?
Okay. Since you're asking about trauma, let me recommend this book, okay, which is, okay, let me shut off my background for a moment so you can see this. This is an excellent book. This book, Trauma and the Soul, by Donald Kalsched. Now, Dr. Kalsched is a Jungian analyst, and he's done a lot of work on trauma. And I found this book to be extremely helpful to me. And I think that many of us in this group have actually referred to it and seen it, read it, and I keep it, as you see, I keep it within my hand reach all the time because it has many pieces of advice in it that can help you with trauma. And we all have trauma at various times. You might have trauma because you get a bad grade, but you might have trauma because you lose a parent or a brother or a sister. And, many things happen in a life. We all lose our parents, certainly. And so each of those events is traumatic, but they also are an opening to your soul and to finding what it is you are all about, what's your foundation, if you will. And I'll thank Jerome Waddle for that word because he's the one that gave it to me. But anyway, I really highly recommend Trauma and the Soul. It's a psycho-spiritual approach to human development and its interruption. And we'll also be talking about this in my tarot classes on Monday night. If you happen to be in the Far East, then the class is Tuesday morning for you. But if you're In the U.S., it's Monday evenings at 8 p.m. And so,
Skip, can you put that link on the YouTube chat to Donald Kalsched's book, because that is a very important book.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to put.
It's important that we learn about trauma. A lot of us don't think we have trauma, but in most cases, I've found we do have traumas, but we need to become aware of them. And this is a very excellent, easy to read book, and he really clarifies it. He's also a Jungian analyst. And as a matter of fact, he did his thesis on Hermann Hesse, which is the book recommended Demian. So this is all connected kind of together. So
yeah. Yeah, we are talking about mental health here. So people like Joss have been facing this all their lives in their professional career. And just for clarity, Skip Conover is not a mental health professional. I've done lots of other things in my life, but not mental health professional. And but Dr. Jung has been my analyst for the last 33 years. And I find that whenever I get in a trauma style situation or a difficult situation, if I pick up any book by Carl Jung, anything else that I may have read of his is connected to that. It's like an amoeba almost. I don't know if that's a fair way to refer to it, but anyway, whatever I need from Dr. Jung flows back into my life, and so I just find by reading his work that anytime I'm in trouble, if I read his work, it all comes together for me again. And so I urge you to learn something about it. And so I don't have a living shrink. I have a dead one, but nonetheless, he's the one, and it's his spirit that keeps my psyche straight. So that's why I do this work now, and because it's helped me so much in my lifetime, that's why I'm sharing it with others now. And so let's see, there were Ruby Clark, did you have another question? Or Menahi Razak, did you have a question? Okay, and anybody else want to unmute? And
I just want to say another thing too, Skip, that's a wonderful testimony, you know, regarding your journey through readings of Jung, and being very diligent about your going through your journey of self-discovery. And I think for everyone here who is, you know, younger than 40, you're going through this period of discovering your identity. And part of your learning to find that identity is your first task is to love yourself. It's all about self-love. And what it means is not that narcissistic kind of love where it's me, but it's love of your uniqueness. And if you can really understand all the things that you think are the negatives and you ignore, but really they may be positives, but you have a different kind of perception of yourself, this is where you need to do your work. And you come to flower or blossom in your individuation, just like Skip, where now you come to accept all there is about yourself. What we label as positive and negative is now a blend of one, just like BTS. You know, BTS is advocating the merging of the positive and the negative, and bringing it all together and blending it. And when you blend it, now you become a new entity. Jerome, I just wanted to say, you know, you got this cool background in your behind you, and showing the group, the BTS group. They're always in working as a unit, but like Stein says, they're all individuals. They're all unique individuals, but they come together and they work as a unit. They work in harmony, and it's so beautiful to watch. So I just encourage every single one of you here who is a BTS fan to keep doing the inner work. It's very fruitful towards your progression in life, and it will get better and better. That's all I can say. Just keep on doing it.
Yes, and going off the Love Yourself, BTS did a Love Yourself album, Tear, and in the album it referenced, or it talked about wearing a mask while you're in a relationship with someone, and it talks about hiding behind lies and pretending to be happy when really you're sad or depressed. And so it kind of asks the question of, did I gain you or did I lose myself? And so I have two questions, and one is this a reference to persona and the ego and shadow that we hide behind the mask? And if so, is this persona okay? Is it healthy for us to have, or should we try to address that?
I think yes and yes.
I agree with Skip.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would actually like to add on to Carissa's point too, because I have been through this as in a toxic friendship or a toxic relationship, wherein you put forth, you do something for a person because you want to please them, but inside it's really traumatizing. And it's kind of, there was a phase where you forget yourself and who you are, because you put on that mask and that mask becomes your face. So yeah, exactly. Like, how would you address that? Personally, I would think that that mask that you put on to please someone would be more, I wouldn't be acceptable. So but that's my personal point of view. So yeah, I do not know how would that be.
I think knowing you're doing it is helpful. We have women on two sides of the world that have completely different perspectives about how they cover their body. On one side, in India, women typically cover themselves from chin to toe, and certainly in the Middle East, that's the case, whereas in the U.S., we have lots of women who want to be out in a skimpy bikini as much as possible. And it has to do with knowing yourself and knowing what you need. And, if you get those feelings about someone else if you put on a mask and they don't want to accept that, then maybe they're telling you something about them that maybe you ought to rethink being involved with them. Maybe that isn't the best person for you.
I'd like to mention something, Skip, that's
Sure.
helpful. And that is, if you pay attention to your body and what your body is doing when you're putting on your mask, it will help support you in making a decision for yourself. If you begin to feel icky or you don't like something, you begin to feel contracted or small, like you're straining or something, then you know that you're not being authentic. And if you can support yourself then, once your body has told you this, and you agree with that, then it helps you stay more authentic, and that helps you be more safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm wearing a mask outside all the time because my wife and mother-in-law and I are all in the danger zone for COVID, and I wouldn't think of not wearing a mask because that's you know, it's essential for our survival right now in terms of where we got to. And you know, most of this group doesn't know that we're having this conversation because of the Spanish flu in 1918, where my grandfather was engaged to a woman who, together with her 4 sisters, all died on the same weekend from the Spanish flu. And as a result of that fact, he married my grandmother, and therefore I could exist. But just think of what it must have meant to that family to lose 5 daughters on one weekend. Really terrible. I have a question here from Koru R, and because this person was the last one to get into the panel, I want to address it. And the statement in the question is this: BTS have not only included the map of the soul in their music and videos since 2015, they have been developing the BTS universe, a fictional story, and have a collective of notes released with each album. These notes have been released as a book called The Most Beautiful Moment in Life. The notes, part 1, referring to youth and coming to love oneself before another as an answer to their conflicts. Recently, Notes Part 2 has been announced to release, where their conflicts have actually not been resolved and leading to finding the map of the soul instead. Do you think that finding the map of the soul and pursuing that journey can be an answer to a person's internal and external conflict? And I would certainly say that you need some grounding in life, and whether that is BTS or whether it's the catechism in your Catholic church, or whether it's using the tarot as a roadmap for life, or whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, all of those things provide a sort of structure by which you can know where you stand in your society. And I think that, you know, BTS's approach is as good as any. Pick one and try it. And when it gets old and not serving you anymore, then do something else. But there are plenty of solutions out there for everybody. That's what I would say.
Well, Skip, I think it provides a map. That's what Murray was saying. It's the map, but it's not the map's not the territory. So you have to go out and explore the territory.
That's right.
At least you've got a little map to go by.
Right.
To explore, and whatever you know, things that suit you. Just like you said, it doesn't have to be BTS. It can be you know, a religious text, or it can be philosophical. It could be all sorts of things. We were talking about, I want to go back to persona. There's a danger that you become your persona and your ego gets attached to it. And that's why they separate persona from ego. So you just got to be very careful not to attach your persona that you show and become that, because that's not you.
Right. Okay, so we're going to answer one more question that is coming from Eden Kaner again. So Eden, you're going to get another chance, but because it so happens that today is my wife's birthday, and so I am called to celebrate her birthday. But Eden, go ahead. One more question.
Hi again. I was so nervous in the start. Anyway, I was about to ask, how can you measure your ego and super ego if they can be seen?
As a what thing?
What?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear your question.
Well, I asked, how can you measure your ego and super ego if they can be seen?
I think she said if they can't be seen.
No, they can't be seen, so how can you measure them? Like if they're too much.
you measure them in your life. If your life is working, then maybe you're doing all right. If your life isn't working, then you need to be trying something else. I guess that's what I would say. Joss, any others who want to?
No, I think that's good. Well, I think what Skip is trying to say, you know, you're going to get some feedback around your in your surrounding, in your culture, in your society. So you find yourself within your culture too. So you do have to be sensitive to, you know, the culture and mores of where you live. You know, after all, you're here to live your life and relate. And relationships are very, very important. That's how you actually help find your inner self. Okay, so that reminds me of the BTS Stay Gold, right? Comes from dark, and then you move upward, and you see this beautiful bright light of tree, and all these little things start falling down, these freckles of gold, and you know they've finally found their way out from, you know, the dungeons of their inner inner shadow and moved towards the light. So that's kind of the journey that we all kind of like are taking, and to find that light, go to the light, go and stay gold. There's a symbol for gold, okay? And explore that symbol, because a few of us have. Gold is a precious metal. It connotes strong, being strong, and it's precious, it's valuable. So your inner self is valuable. So find that gold within.
Right. So there's one other question that's a good question, and it probably needs the help of a psychiatrist, Joss, but it's from Maliha Rafi. And she says, hi, if it's not too late, my question was, what does continuously dying in one dream mean? And what links does that have to our subconscious? I have come to a point where after having dreams of dying and being chased by people who mean harm toward me, I am now even dreaming of potentially killing others, unknown faces alongside me, running away from attackers. And I was wondering what that could mean, and if somehow has much deeper meaning than I can grasp. I'll take a crack at it, Joss, but in general, I don't interpret other people's dreams, but I will talk about my own dreams. And in my case, when I was about 40, I was having many, many execution dreams. I was being executed by every possible means under the sun, by guillotine, by hanging, by firing squad. Every night I was having a dream of being executed. And what these dreams were about, and our unconscious speaks to us in a very bombastic way. It wants to get our attention. That's what it does. And so that's pretty bombastic to say, yeah, you're going to die, you're going to be executed, whatever. And at that time, I was trying to find a job. I didn't have a job. And so every morning I'd wake up and I'd say, yeah, I know I don't have a job. Please tell me something I don't know. because we have to have some way to pay the bills, right? And so our unconscious sometimes gets out of control, and it's okay to talk back to it. Joss, did you have anything further about that, about dreams of dying?
Oh God, you know, I've had plenty of those too. And yeah, some horrible dreams, but you know, these are just metaphors. Remember now, this is the beauty about getting into Jung, and it makes you less fearful, because now, you know, by understanding what Jung went through in his dreams, because his dreams are, you know, he's got monsters all over the place coming out of his red book. And it sounds kind of gory and actually frightful, but he makes sense out of that. And a lot of times death means rebirth. So it's the part of your persona or your ego is now like shedding or diminishing or dying. And now you're merging to a new self. So, you know, that can happen too in like relationships when, you know, you fall in love and then you know, break up and, you know, wow, you know, unmet needs of, of feeling of inadequacy, and then you get a bad dream and you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm dying. But it's like a rebirth. You're cleansing now, and you're going to be starting something new. So these are all, you know, metaphors. But if you know these are recurring and you're feeling kind of anxious, share it with someone. And if it gets too much, then maybe it's time to get some help. You know, you've got ARMY, and they've got ways to triage you to connect with a therapist who would be much more in tune and professional in helping you with more details, because we can't certainly interpret these dreams for you here in this forum, but because we don't know you, you need to get more history and more detail about what's going on. But not to be afraid, but it's in your awareness now. So now you have control. Now you have a decision what you want to do with this information. It's an information that's come up. And deal with it appropriately, and deal it with responsibility. Take responsibility for feelings that are not in sync, and it's not resonating with you. Seek help.
Yeah. And I've just shown you one of the images from the Red Book, which has the dragon that was after Dr. Jung, right? And so one of his ways of dealing with these things was to paint them, paint a picture of it, make it as clear as you can, as good of a image of it as you can, and then you can put it in your own Red Book, and it won't bother you in your life. So, I mean, that's a generic point, but if you're really feeling out of control, then you must seek mental health help. And I don't want to dissuade anybody from doing that. I just think that BTS has offered a great outlet for people, especially young people, in understanding their mental health better. And so that's why, as Mirces knows, ever since a year ago in April, when I first heard about Map of the Soul Persona, I've been really excited about what BTS does, because the reality is that the Jungian community has kept this information secret for a century, basically. And as I've gotten more and more into it over the last 33 years, I was tearing my hair about how this information could get out in the general public. And here BTS is making it readily available. And so what I want to do in closing here is I want to read a quote. This is from Man and His Symbols, and it's in the last essay that Dr. Jung wrote in his life. He finished it only 10 days before he died. But there's one paragraph here that really sums up everything that you need to know. And and here it is. As any change must begin somewhere, it is the single individual who will experience it and carry it through. The change must indeed begin with an individual. It might be any one of us. Nobody can afford to look around and to wait for somebody else to do what he is loath to do himself. But since nobody seems to know what to do, it might be worthwhile for each of us to ask himself whether by any chance his or her unconscious may know something that will help us. Certainly the conscious mind seems unable to do anything useful in this respect. man today is painfully aware of the fact that neither his great religions nor his various philosophies seem to provide him with those powerful animating ideas that would give him the security he needs in the face of the present condition of the world. And so this building behind me is Dr. Jung's confession in stone of his faith in that idea that it's the individual that has to do something. And this meeting that we've had and everything that I've done on my YouTube channel is my testimony that an individual can make a difference. And even though I've never taken a psychology course in my life, people seem to care about what I've been doing the last 15 years, but especially the last 4 years. So, and I'm glad you're all here. So many of you are still here. But I need to apologize and call this meeting to an end because of a responsibility in the family. And just another little factoid, my mother-in-law was born on Pearl Harbor Day on December 7th, and my wife was born on Nagasaki Day. And this is the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. And so that's worth all of our reflections as we go forward with our day. And I hope to see many of you tomorrow in the Tarot class. So thank you all for being here today, and see you again soon. Peace.
Love to all.
Thank you, Skip.
Aloha.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
You're so
Bye-bye.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.